You know, pirates really do have a tough time playing cards, mostly because the captain's always standing on the deck. Hey folks, welcome to This Week in History. Let's get this thing going. On May 9th of 1271, Lord Edward of England arrived at Acre as part of the Ninth Crusade, also known as Lord Edward's Crusade because he wasn't a king yet, he was just a duke. Now, he would eventually become Edward I, probably better known as Edward the Longshanks, the king from Braveheart. In 1662, the character who would become Mr. Punch made his first recorded appearance in England. Mr. Punch, of course, being one half of Punch and Judy, or as some people know them, those weird puppets that are always hitting each other. In 1887, Buffalo Bill Cody's Wild West show opened for the first time internationally in London. It had been touring the US since its founding in 1883, and it would eventually go bankrupt in 1913. On May 10th, 1768, rioting broke out in London after John Wilkes was imprisoned for writing an article severely criticizing King George III. He was not the last member of his family to have issues with the leader, as he was the distant relative of a man named after him, actor, American heartthrob, seriously, several critics referred to him as the handsomest man in America, and presidential assassin John Wilkes Booth. In 1773, the British Parliament passed the Tea Act, which, yes, led to the Boston Tea Party, but let's take a closer look for a second. So the Tea Act, which led to liberty, was created in order to save the British East India Company from going bankrupt by allowing the company to not only sell directly to the American colonies. Up to that point, they had to sell it to merchants at the London Tea Auction, and those merchants sent it to the colonies, so this pretty much cut out the middleman, and it allowed the company to get rid of the ridiculous amount of tea they had in storage just waiting to be used. It would also set the precedent for taxation that they could point to and allow them to more or less use the money to bribe leaders in the colonies to keep them loyal. This, of course, did not work. Roughly 83% of the tea consumed in the colonies was smuggled in by the Dutch, which was admittedly of lesser quality, but it wasn't British, so they drank it just to stick it to the man. Oh, and a misconception about the Boston Tea Party: some of the participants dressed up as Native Americans during it, and this was not to make the British think that the natives were responsible. Actually, it's pretty much the opposite. See, the colonists viewed Native Americans as, well, Native Americans rather than British, so by dressing as Native Americans, they were showing that they were American, not British. At least that was their thought process. And a shout out to our patrons, Steve Stevens and Clayton Jaimez. We really appreciate the support, and we appreciate the support from all of you in the forms of watching, liking, sharing, all that good stuff. But keep in mind, we make nothing from YouTube. We don't get ad revenue, so the only money we actually make is from merch and Patreon. That's why we keep bringing it up. Trust me, if I didn't have to, I wouldn't. And yes, I'm aware that insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result, but you know, we're all squirrely here anyway. On May 11th in 330, the city of New Rome was renamed Constantinople. It had already been renamed from Byzantium to New Rome and would eventually be renamed again, this time to Istanbul. In 1813, a route through the Blue Mountains was finally discovered by William Lawson, Gregory Blaxland, and William Wentworth, this allowing for the settlement of inland Australia to begin. On May 12th in 1510, the Prince of Anhua rebellion began in China when Zhu Zifan invited officials to a banquet where he had them all killed. The rebellion would later end with his capture, and he was allowed to kill himself rather than be executed. On May 13th in 1779, the War of Bavarian Succession came to an end after a truce was finally negotiated. This is seen as the last of the cabinet wars, also known as the wars between princes, that more or less consisted of monarchs fighting each other over family power using armies of mercenaries. The French Revolutionary Wars began the next phase of warfare. In 1865, the Battle of Palmito Ranch took place in South Texas, making it the last land battle of the U.S. Civil War. It's also interesting because it included white, black, Hispanic, and Native American troops, and it took place place after the war had supposedly ended. And if you're wondering, it probably took place because the Union commander hadn't seen any action in the war and he wanted to earn himself some glory. They lost the battle, by the way. On May 15th of 1252, Pope Innocent IV issued the papal bull Ad Extirpanda, which authorized but also limited the torturing of heretics during the medieval inquisitions. The more important rules was that it could not cause the loss of life or limb, that it could only be used once, and that the inquisitor had to deem the evidence against the accused to be certain. But yeah, they could still torture people. And that's just gonna about do it for this week, but we'll see you back here next week. Same squirrel time, same squirrel channel. Be happy, be healthy, and y'all come back now, you hear?